Tonight, Donald Trump found guilty of falsifying business records, the first US president convicted of a crime. Also tonight, a Canberra man charged with murder and arson over a fatal house fire in Belconnen last week. No hope of finding survivors. A grim assessment as the relief operation gets underway after PNG's deadly landslide. And Bruce Lehrmann to appeal against a federal court ruling that on the balance of probabilities he did rape Brittany Higgins. Yuma, good evening. Adrienne Francis with ABC News, coming to you from Ngunnawal country, and we also acknowledge other people and families with connection to the lands of the ACT. Guilty on all counts. That's the verdict from a jury that's turned Donald Trump from a former commander-in-chief into a convicted felon. 12 everyday Americans voted unanimously in an historic hush money trial that's tested the resilience of the American justice system. Leading our coverage tonight, North American Bureau Chief Jade McMillan, who has been following the trial in New York.
I'm outside the court where US history was made. Finally, a verdict in this case and a legal reckoning for a former president. But the political impact of this decision won't be fully understood until Americans vote in November. One of Donald Trump's last moments before becoming a convicted felon. It took a jury of 12 ordinary New Yorkers a day and a half to reach a verdict, declaring the former president guilty of all 34 counts of falsifying business records.
This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people.
The jury found Donald Trump falsified the records to cover up hush money paid to porn star Stormy Daniels on the eve of the 2016 election, to silence her claim of a sexual encounter a decade earlier and protect his campaign.
We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man.
Trump's lawyers will likely appeal against the verdict. His supporters echoed his argument that he'd been unfairly targeted.
I never voted for him the first time, but we'll do it this time. It's a disgrace.
Even if Trump goes to jail, gets out, or gets bail, or whatever, we're all going to vote for Trump still.
But others were overjoyed at the decision to make Donald Trump the first ever former US president convicted of a crime.
I don't expect him to go to jail, but a lie is a lie and a conviction is a conviction.
Trump is facing a potential prison term, but many legal experts expect the judge would take his lack of a prior criminal record into account and consider probation.
I'm so pleased that there's finally some accountability for Donald Trump.
The man who brought the case, Democratic District Attorney Alvin Bragg, insists it was handled like any other.
And while this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors.
But in a polarised America 5 months out from the election, the political impact is yet to be measured. President Joe Biden's campaign releasing a statement arguing no one is above the law. The only way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office is at the ballot box. Donald Trump's wife Melania was absent from the trial, so too his daughter Ivanka. But she posted to Instagram, "I love you, Dad." International reaction has been more tempered.
I obviously have, people might have observed, a close relationship with President Biden. We get on very well, but the relationship between Australia and the United States is a relationship between nations, not just between individuals.
Donald Trump will be sentenced in July, just days before he's expected to be confirmed as the Republican nominee. Donald Trump's conviction came after weeks of painstaking testimony of sex scandals, tabloids and cover-ups. A former ally turned against him, offering key evidence for prosecutors to secure their win in the hush money case.
From US president to convicted felon on 34 counts, Donald Trump's trial was a salacious and unpredictable affair. At its centre, whether the former president falsified business records to cover up a bribe paid to porn star Stormy Daniels during his 2016 campaign.
This fake case was brought only to interfere with the upcoming 2024 election, and it should be dropped immediately.
96 random civilians were whittled down until 12 took their place in the jury. Each day drawing throngs of vocal supporters and opponents, as well as global media. The prosecution's witness list included everyone from political spin doctors to the former president's close friends, among them tabloid publisher David Pecker. He testified he'd been involved in a scheme burying news stories that could have damaged Mr. Trump's first run at the White House. When Ms. Daniels took the stand, she aired explicit details of their sexual encounter at the heart of the hush money payment, prompting the defence to call for a mistrial, a request the judge ultimately rejected. The prosecution's star witness, though, was Michael Cohen, Trump's former personal attorney and political problem solver. He told the jury the former president had known everything and had covered it up to protect his campaign. Testimony from a former right-hand man proving key to the conviction, handed down in this courthouse in downtown Manhattan.
Perhaps more than anything, Donald Trump is a product of New York City. His brash demeanour and the kind of business approach many here would call hustle have also defined his life in the public eye. In New York, Donald Trump built his name. And today, 12 New Yorkers bestowed a new title, convicted criminal.
With 2 impeachments and civil trials finding him liable for sexual assault and fraud, this isn't the first time Donald Trump has made US political history for the wrong reasons, and it might not be the last. He still faces another 3 criminal cases, 2 relating to alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election result, and 1 over the handling of classified documents. But they're unlikely to go to trial before US voters choose their next president in November. Carrington Clark, ABC News, New York.
Well, Donald Trump has managed to galvanise support off the back of all of his criminal cases, easily winning the Republican nomination earlier this year. North America correspondent Barbara Miller joins me now from Washington. Barbara, Donald Trump is due to be officially confirmed as the Republican nominee just days after he's sentenced. How has the party responded?
Look, we've really seen top Republicans rally around Donald Trump. The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, for example, saying it was a shameful day in American history, and that kind of sentiment echoed by many of Donald Trump's allies. But even those who have a more complicated relationship with the former president have come out in support of him. I'm thinking there of Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, for example, saying that the charges should never have been brought. Not much room for dissent then, at least tonight. And in fact, when one well-known Republican, Larry Hogan, came out and said that the rule of law should be respected, he was immediately shot down by a top campaign official. What's going to be interesting is how this plays with the voting public, and polls have consistently shown that if he's actually convicted, that some Republicans would reconsider whether or not to vote for Donald Trump.
And what about Joe Biden's campaign? How's it playing this?
Well, we saw that very quick response from the Biden campaign saying that the verdict showed that no one was above the law, but also really trying to drive home the message that, felon or not, Donald Trump will be contesting this November's election. And the only way, they said, to keep him out of the Oval Office is at the ballot box. I think that's partly a call to Democrats to turn out in November, and that's amid concerns that Joe Biden is losing support among some key constituencies. Now, we haven't heard directly from Joe Biden today. He initially didn't comment on this trial. More recently, he's chosen to mock Donald Trump over it. And we saw that stunt this week from the Biden campaign where they sent Robert De Niro down to the courthouse. So I think they're still trying to work out how to play this. Now, of course, it's all about the money, and the Republican side is saying that one of their websites crashed because of the flow of donations coming in the wake of this verdict. That will be a concern if it's true to the Biden campaign, and something else, Jade, to watch over the coming days.
Barbara Miller in Washington, thank you. As Americans digest the verdict, there are major questions hanging over Donald Trump's campaign for the White House. Our Global Affairs editor John Lyons has more.
Donald Trump will be sentenced on the 11th of July. Each count carries a maximum sentence of 4 years. So prison time is possible, but legal experts believe it's highly unlikely.
Likely, Mr. Trump will receive a non-custodial term and possibly a fine and so forth.
Whether he ends up behind bars or not, Donald Trump can still run for president. There is a precedent. In 1920, the socialist candidate Eugene Debs ran from prison while serving a 10-year sentence. He got 3% of the vote. And what if Trump wins in November? Could he pardon himself? Not only is that power untested, it only applies to federal crimes, and this conviction happened in a state court. So that would leave him relying on the New York governor, and she's a Democrat.
There's still plenty to play out in the United States over the next 5 months as we get closer to the election. But for now, that's all from an historic day here in New York City.
To other news now, and a Canberra man is behind bars tonight, charged with murder and arson after a fatal house fire in Belconnen last week. 38-year-old Atam Marul Deng made a brief appearance in court where his lawyer indicated he would plead not guilty to both charges.
A home completely destroyed by fire. It was only when the blaze in Holt had been extinguished that police made the chilling discovery. The 36-year-old resident, Bol Ador Deng, had perished in the fire. Today, his brothers have called for justice for him and his 8 children, saying he was a loving, caring person.
It's a very terrible situation for our family. We cannot believe that we lost him that way. And other thing is that we did not believe that Bol is gone.
Police alleged almost from the start the fire was suspicious, started using an accelerant.
We believe it was petrol. Unfortunately, due to the nature of fire, a lot of the evidence, physical evidence at the crime scenes are destroyed.
The official cause of death was asphyxiation as a result of inhaling smoke from the fire. Police say they've interviewed neighbours and collected CCTV footage from the area as part of their investigation. Atam Marul Deng was arrested at a house in Turner yesterday morning. Though not related, police believe the men knew each other.
There was a dispute between the men that we are still looking further into and conducting more inquiries as we put together the brief of evidence.
Atam Marul Deng briefly appeared in court today when he was formally charged with murder and arson. He left it to his lawyer to indicate pleas of not guilty and did not apply for bail. But that's been little comfort for Bol Ador Deng's family.
We need justice for Bol, and such act in the community, it's not acceptable. Anywhere, anytime, it's not acceptable.
Atam Marul Deng will be back in court in August. Elizabeth Byrne, ABC News, Canberra.
Papua New Guinea Prime Minister James Marape has made his first visit to disaster-hit Enga province since a landslide killed what's thought to be hundreds of people. Villagers remain in mourning for loved ones buried under at least 6 metres of rubble a week ago. There's also growing concern another landslide could hit the region. Thousands of survivors have been ordered to leave the disaster zone. Mr Marape met officials tasked with disaster relief. Locals have criticised his government for their slow response, with aid taking days to arrive. The Prime Minister has pledged to improve regional infrastructure in the wake of the disaster.
We learn from this experience to live with disaster, adjust, and we rise up, get going better, not just for West Enga, flowing out for the entire country.
US President Joe Biden has allowed Ukraine to fire into Russian territory using American weapons. Biden's order only applies to the northeastern Kharkiv region, which has been the focus of a Russian cross-border offensive in recent weeks. Until now, Ukrainian soldiers haven't been allowed to hit Russian positions behind the frontier because of fears it would escalate the conflict. The United States is Ukraine's largest supplier of weapons, and Kyiv had complained the restrictions were hobbling its defence of the country's second largest city. Russia hasn't commented on the policy change. New Zealand's Prime Minister has expressed grave concerns about Australia's plan to change immigration policy following the latest controversy about visas. Australia regularly deports foreign-born criminals, which has frustrated New Zealand, as many deportees have spent most of their lives in Australia. Last year, the federal government directed tribunals to take into account ties to Australia when considering such cases. But that's about to change after revelations a string of foreigners convicted of serious violent offences have remained in the country. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the change is in Australia's national interest, which has frustrated Wellington.
Raise in very clear terms our grave concerns about the change to that policy. You know, as we well know, it's not fair that actually we get deportees coming back to New Zealand that have got very little connection or no connection to this country. That's not right.
Former Liberal staffer Bruce Lehrmann has lodged notice that he will appeal against a federal court finding that on the balance of probabilities he did rape Brittany Higgins at Parliament House in 2019. Bruce Lehrmann lost his bid to sue Network 10 and journalist Lisa Wilkinson over an interview with Ms Higgins on The Project, when Justice Michael Lee found 10 had proved its truth defence. He launched the defamation action after his criminal trial was abandoned with no findings against him. The notice lodged this afternoon comes as the federal court considers the final figure for costs awarded against Mr Lehrmann in the defamation case. No details have been released about the terms of the appeal. Australian Border Force says it's disrupted a major illegal tobacco supplier in Canberra. Nearly 300,000 cigarettes, disposable vapes and loose-leaf tobacco were seized in raids in Holt, Belconnen and Narrabundah on Wednesday. The items seized are valued at more than $500,000. Border Force says it suspects the products were illegally imported and distributed in Canberra, and their investigations are continuing. A 44-year-old man has been arrested and charged with hindering a Commonwealth official. The National Gallery of Australia says global media coverage of a controversial portrait of billionaire Gina Rinehart has boosted visitor numbers by 24%. Vincent Namatjira's painting of the mining magnate is part of his Australia in Colour collection, which features prominent Australians in the artist's trademark style. The free exhibition has been running at the NGA in Canberra since March, but Australia's richest woman was only reported to have requested her portrait be taken down earlier this month. The gallery's director was quizzed on the row during a Senate estimates hearing and confirmed the exhibition has prompted more than 120 feedback submissions.
74 were positive, 4 were neutral, 47 were negative, and we received 8 requests to remove the portrait.
To finance now, and it was a strong day for the local share market, but shares of Donald Trump's social media company fell after the former US president was found guilty in his New York criminal trial. Here's David Chow.
Well, right after Donald Trump was found guilty in his hush money trial, the odds of Joe Biden winning the next US election surged, but not by enough, as the odds still favour Trump getting his old job back, even in the unlikely event that he goes to jail. The guilty verdict also had an effect on the share price of his social media company, Trump Media, which dropped more than 6% in after-hours trade. But overall, he's still doing okay financially. If Trump Media were to be listed here, its $13.8 billion market valuation would make it the 38th biggest company on the ASX, just behind IAG and well ahead of Qantas, 2 companies which actually make money. Its share price has quadrupled over the past year, despite an $87 million loss last year and just $6 million in revenue. As you can see here, its share price is extremely volatile and driven mainly by sentiment towards Donald Trump himself, rather than actual fundamentals. Meanwhile, it's been a good day for the All Ords, which jumped 1% in a single session as investors bought the dip. But it's down 0.4% for the week after all those falls in the last few days. And Telix Pharmaceuticals, with its 15% surge, was the best performing stock after it announced positive test results from a trial of its prostate cancer drugs. Overseas, Wall Street fell 0.6%, while share markets in Europe and Japan rose. There was a big fall in oil and iron ore prices while gold was flat, and the Aussie dollar is buying 66.3 US cents. And that's finance.
To sport now, and the Canberra Raiders will be aiming for a more consistent performance tomorrow night when they take on the fourth-place Dolphins in Redcliffe. They welcome back Josh Papali'i from a one-match ban, but lose back rower Hudson Young to State of Origin duties. The Dolphins will also be without two key players due to Origin, Hamiso Tabui Fido and Felice Kafusi. Almost halfway through the regular season, the Raiders have won 6 games but lost 5, including last week's 28-point thrashing against the Roosters at home. Coach Ricky Stewart is expecting wet conditions and says ball control and consistency across the board will be crucial.
We've shown really good signs of attack at times, and then there's times there we've got to be smarter. But the inconsistency in our game is something that we want to keep working on.
Asbestos campaigners have called on the Parramatta Eels to drop its new 4-year sponsorship deal with the former asbestos manufacturer James Hardie. James Hardie sponsored Parramatta in the 80s and 90s when the Eels won 4 premierships. The company was subsequently involved in decades of court cases as victims sought compensation for cancer and other asbestos-related diseases. Parramatta told the ABC it empathised with families of asbestos victims and gave careful consideration to the sponsorship deal, adding James Hardie was committed to doing the right thing. But asbestos campaigners say they want the Eels to reconsider the deal.
It's a trigger. It's bringing back all the bad memories of what has happened to their family members. That's what it's done, this announcement.
In tennis, Australia's Alex de Minaur and Thanasi Kokkinakis are through to the 3rd round at the French Open. It comes as organisers clamp down on loud fans, with no more drinking allowed among spectators.
It's a familiar scenario for Thanasi Kokkinakis, with his back against the wall at a Grand Slam. The world number 98 didn't give up after losing the first 2 sets against Italian Giulio Zeppieri. Kokkinakis delivered. Australia's top-ranked star Alex de Minaur is through to the 3rd round for the first time at Roland Garros. He had a straight sets win over Spain's Jaume Munar.
Feels good. It feels like I've finally broken a barrier down.
De Minaur was asked to sign some wine glasses after the match, but they won't be seeing any action near the courts, with organisers banning the consumption of alcohol in the stands.
Oh, Djokovic is not happy.
Rowdy fans have been yelling at players during rallies. Belgium's David Goffin says someone threw gum at him.
I support a player standing up, against people who are disrespecting and heckling him.
Organisers hope the booze ban will keep the crowd in check over the remaining 9 days and appease the players. Bindi Bryce, ABC News.
Japanese golfer Yuka Saso holds the outright lead after the opening round of the US Women's Golf Open in Pennsylvania. The 2021 champion holds a 1-shot lead after a 2-under par round of 68. French amateur golfer Adela Cernosek is one of 3 players tied for 2nd. Minjee Lee is the best of the Australians, 2 strokes off the lead at even par, following a round that included 5 birdies and 5 bogeys. World number 1 Nelly Korda had a horror opening round, finishing with a 10-over par 80. It's been more than 50 years since a female driver has qualified for a Formula One Grand Prix. A new global initiative is hoping to change that by developing the next generation of young talent.
Meet the young racer looking to level the playing field in motorsports.
I don't really care if it's like a girl sport. I just want to be like the best of the best.
12-year-old Lana Flack can't legally drive a car, but she's on track to becoming a Formula One racer. The Brisbane schoolgirl is one of 6 young women handpicked from around the world to take part in the More Than Equal program, designed to help females bridge the gender gap.
There's been an absence of females at the top end of our sport for 50 years, and there's no reason why that should happen.
But it hasn't been all smooth racing.
Some boys are supportive, other boys aren't. Most of them take me out and bully me.
Lana's dad, who's no stranger to racing cars, agrees it's time for change.
Over the last few years, obviously, I think a lot of racing dads have got their little girls into the motorsport scene as well. At the end of the day, it's really exciting to see, and I think there's a good future for it.
The program is research-driven with the goal of creating a new generation of racing talent. It's also hoping it will create the first female F1 champion, and Lana's confident she's in pole position.
I want to be like the first female to win a championship and get the most podiums.
Speeding past the stereotype. Ariana Levy, ABC News, Brisbane.
Sounds promising. To the weather now and your viewer observations. Thanks to Monique Butsalar for sharing this glorious moment during a walk in Womboyne. We love receiving all your photos. Send them to Canberra Weather Pics at abc.net.au in focus and landscape orientation. After a wet night with 18 millimetres of rain recorded overnight in the valley and 13 millimetres north side, there were light scattered showers through some districts through the day. After a low of 9, we reached a top of 17. Around the capital, Thredbo Top Station recorded more than 86 millimetres of rain in the gauge overnight. Through the day, Goulburn recorded 12 millimetres. It was very windy along the Illawarra and Eden coastlines. Nowra reached a top of 20 today. Across the nation, it was wet for Perth, Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. The satellite is showing a band of clouds spreading from WA's northeast through central Australia to New South Wales with a trough bringing the widespread rain. Cloud over Tasmania, South Australia and Victoria with a trough is causing those gusty showers and the odd storm. There's also showery cloud in Queensland's east and the Northern Territory's north in moist winds. Tomorrow, on the first day of winter, rain is forecast for Sydney and Brisbane, possible showers for Melbourne, late showers are forecast for Perth. Yass Valley can expect the chance of morning fog with a high chance of showers in the northeast, medium chance elsewhere and a top of 15 degrees. Across the high country, lows of -2 are forecast before a medium chance of snow showers in the afternoon and evening. Bateman's Bay is expecting a high chance of showers, most likely in the evening, with a top of 17. And there's also a marine strong wind warning for the Illawarra, Batemans and Eden coasts. After a low of 1 north side and 2 in the valley and the chance of morning fog and frost in the early morning, Canberra can expect the slight chance of a shower and a partly cloudy day with 15 the top and light winds becoming east to southeasterly 15 to 20 kilometres an hour in the early afternoon, then tending south to southeasterly in the evening. The sun will rise at 6:59 a.m. and set at 5:03 p.m. Looking ahead, there is the slight chance of a shower Sunday to Tuesday with cloud, morning frost Tuesday, medium chance of showers Wednesday to Thursday, partly cloudy on Friday. Now, over the longer term, the Bureau is forecasting another unusually warm winter for almost all of Australia, including the capital cities, with the jury out on rainfall. Large swathes of WA's south, Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales, Tasmania and southern South Australia are at least 3.5 to 4 times more likely to have both daytime and nighttime temperatures in the top 20% of all records. And that's the very latest from the Canberra newsroom. I'm Adrienne Francis. Yara, good night.